Space Industry Indemnities Bill, second reading.
I call John Grady.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. It may be of interest to Madam Deputy Speaker that Bradford itself is a real centre of space expertise, and it has a real centre of expertise at the University of Bradford. I will return to that later. I'm privileged to introduce a bill that will help push forward investment in the UK's critical space sector. The bill will amend two sections of the Space Industry Act 2018 to provide legal certainty that all spaceflight operator licences must include a limit on the amount of the operator's liability to the government under Section 36 of the 2018 Act. Now, one may ask, what are spaceflight activities? This comprises launching into space spacecraft such as satellites, operating spacecraft in space, for example, allowing a spacecraft to orbit the Earth and bringing spacecraft back down to Earth. Under the international law applicable to space, governments, including the UK, are liable for damage to property or death or personal injury caused by their space activities or by their nationals. This is a key reason why Section 36 of the 2018 Act requires people carrying out spaceflight activities to indemnify the government against such claims. The reason why the bill provides legal certainty over the need to limit liability is because this will help encourage much desperately needed investment into the sector. Madam Deputy Speaker, the space sector and satellites are central to almost everyone's day-to-day life. Take something simple, a trip to a football match. For Middlesbrough fans, I'm afraid I'm not amongst them, their famous fanzine is called Fly Me to the Moon. This is not a reference to Sinatra, but they may buy this using contactless. People make their way to the match with the use of maps and travel updates on their phones and use Google Pay or Apple Wallet to store tickets and get into the stadium. All this, Madam Deputy Speaker, depends on satellite technology. Now, one may ask why the Borrow fanzine is called Fly Me to the Moon. It is because Bruce Rioch, a great Scottish manager, then manager of Middlesbrough, said of his captain, "If I had to fly to the moon, I'd take Tony Mowbray, my captain, with me. He's a magnificent man." And both men played a significant role in saving that magnificent football club. Suppose, Madam Deputy Speaker, you wanted to read on your device The First Men in the Moon by H.G. Wells. This requires satellites. The protagonist in that novel is a Mr. Bedford, and I was brought up in Bedford, a wonderful town in Bedfordshire. And the member for Bedford is a fine friend. Suppose you want to stream Breakfast at Tiffany's, famous for Audrey Hepburn singing Moon River. Streaming music depends on satellites. I will confess that Moon River was one of my lullabies of choice when my children were younger and I was desperately trying to get them to sleep. I did not think that Subterranean Homesick Alien by Radiohead would be quite the opposite choice. Or for that matter, Lou Reed's great song, Satellite of Love. So I stuck with Moon River. The House will be pleased to know that I do not propose to sing Moon River because I am absolutely appalling at singing. The critical point is that satellites and related technology are critical to modern life, and they will become even more so. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is a very significant economic opportunity for the United Kingdom here. European demand for satellites up to 2023 is forecast to be worth 50 billion. Even 2% of this would bring around £1 billion, $1 billion, I beg your pardon, in revenues for the UK economy alone. This provides a very serious economic opportunity to the United Kingdom, and we must seize this with both hands. And this is because we must get growth back into the British economy, and that is what our government is determined to do. And space, Madam Deputy Speaker, is an industry of a future hundreds of years, and it is absolutely critical that we invest and support industries that can bring our family of nations prosperity for decades and decades to come. As President John F. Kennedy said, man and his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not, and it is one of the great adventures of all time. President Kennedy said this in 1961, and in 2025, I say it is high time that the United Kingdom got stuck into this adventure and seized the opportunities it will provide.
Will I give you on that point?
I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I thank him for bringing this bill today. He's really reaching for the stars with it, quite literally. I'm proud to have a company in my constituency called Alpha Data. They're just 50 metres from my constituency office, but the products they design are 250 miles above us. They have a sensor on the outside of the International Space Station which measures atmospheric heating and cooling. They employ 30 people in their office, but their supply chain stretches from inside the city to Kilsyth, the Scottish borders and nearby Livingston. Does my honourable friend agree with me that this company is evidence that the space sector is thriving in Scotland, and this bill should help it to go to infinity and beyond?
I could not agree with my honourable friend more. Edinburgh has a thriving space sector, as does Scotland. And may I say, my honourable friend has been for many years heavily involved in work to grow the economy in Edinburgh and the borders, and I pay tribute for that. I must, however, take this opportunity to pick a minor bone with the honourable member. He mentioned that Glasgow does not have a castle. I wish to correct the record, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have a fine ruined castle called Crookston Castle. It's the second oldest building in Glasgow. The first oldest building in Glasgow is the beautiful cathedral. And I'm not going to indulge in a dispute about whether Edinburgh and Glasgow are better cities. They are both beautiful, great cities. Glasgow is slightly better, but there you are. But I'm obliged to my honourable friend for his intervention, and I'm also glad to be able to correct that point from my dear friend. There is another reason, Madam Deputy Speaker, why it is very important that we have a thriving space and satellite industry. Madam Deputy Speaker, space is critical to defence, and we must have a thriving space sector to protect our country. Of course, the United Kingdom works with allies to ensure that our interests are defended in space. However, the world is becoming more unstable, and it is essential we have our own capabilities to launch and operate satellites from the United Kingdom. And this bill is important in that regard too. It will help secure a vibrant end-to-end space industry in the United Kingdom, and this is important for defence. I take one example. Having our own domestic launch capability is very, very important, and a vibrant civilian sector will help cover the costs of that launch capability. So this bill also has a national security theme. Madam Deputy Speaker, owing to much hard work, including by the last government, the UK Space Agency, and many others, the United Kingdom also has a very firm foundation for a thriving space industry. In the time available, I cannot provide a complete survey of the vibrant and growing space industry, but here are some key points. One of the key tasks we've had is to develop our own launch capability, to put satellites up to space and then to get them back down. And that's why there's so much chat about spaceports in my life, at least. Saxavord, the UK spaceport in the Shetland Islands, is one of only 2 licensed vertical launch spaceports in Europe. That, of course, is at the far end, the north of the map of our family of nations. Down in the far southwest, we also have an operational spaceport in Cornwall. So, This illustrates, Madam Deputy Speaker, that space is an opportunity for our family of nations from the very top to the very bottom, only in a cartographic sense. I'm not obviously looking to offend any members from Cornwall. There are also spaceports under construction and planned in Sutherland, on the far north of the coast of Scotland, to the west of Thurso, North Uist, which is a place I would commend. I spent much of my honeymoon there. It's a wonderful place. Glasgow Prestwick, Spaceport Machrihanish on the southern tip of the Argyll Peninsula, which I'd also recommend for a visit to Scotland, and Snowdonia. Some may wonder where these places are. They are all wonderful places, and this illustrates too that space is an opportunity across the United Kingdom. Now, let us turn to satellites, or as Lou Reed sang, satellites of love. The UK has incredible talents in manufacturing satellites and satellite technology. Of course, as a Scottish MP, I focus on Scotland, and as a Glasgow MP, I would also focus on Glasgow. But let's start in the Moray Firth, where my mother came from. It has a fine tradition of engineering, and for those of you who follow Highland League football, I suspect I'm in a minority of one in the House today. The fact that Forres Mechanics is one of the oldest football clubs in the north of Scotland points to a tradition of engineering in the north of Scotland. Jones, the shipyard in Buckie is another great engineering industry in the north of Scotland. But of significant more relevance to this debate is that Forres is home to Orbex, who are developing a rocket called Prime, which will be the first UK manufactured and UK launched orbital rocket. Prime is set to take off from Saxaboard in 2025, and the UK government has recently announced a £20 million investment into Orbex, an important investment and one that demonstrates the opportunities that this brings to the north of Scotland, for which we need to redouble our efforts to secure economic growth and prosperity. My home city of Glasgow has a rich history of innovation and has an incredibly promising cluster of space expertise. And I am, as an MP for Glasgow, determined that it has a bright future in space. Glasgow is building more satellites than any other city in Europe. And there are fantastic companies in this area including Albert Orbital, which specialises in pocket cube satellites, AAC Clyde Space, which has expertise in small satellite technology, and Spire Global, leading provider of space-based data, analytics and space services. This year is Glasgow's 850th birthday, and I say this bill helps secure the prosperity of Glasgow for the next 850 years, creating jobs and economic growth in my great city, a great city of hard work, innovation and enterprise. There is, Madam Deputy Speaker, clear economic analysis which shows that the space industry is an important opportunity for growth and jobs. The latest Size and Health of the UK Space Industry report estimates that 228 organisations in Scotland generated a combined income of 298 million in 2021-22, almost double that for 2018-19 in real terms. Around 6,500 people work in space in Scotland, and in the UK it's between 48,000 and 52,000. And income amounts to between 17.5 to 20 billion. And there are over 100,000 jobs in the supply chain as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, pause for a moment. We've only just got going on this, and we have 48,000 or more jobs. There is much potential for many more high-paid jobs here. And that is what Britain needs. Good, high-paid jobs of the future. Delighted to give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He has very detailed and eloquent descriptions of the UK space sector, and in particular Glasgow's contribution. But what is the provision in this bill doing to make space for the rest of us, including in South Wales and across Wales, in making sure that space is also felt in our communities?
I'm obliged, and I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. This bill applies across the United Kingdom, and obviously there is a space industry in South Wales too, and so it will encourage investment in South Wales by protecting investors against unlimited liability. So I see this as absolutely critical for the space industry in South Wales as well as in Scotland. Naturally, I focus on Scotland because I'm obsessed with the place. But I would also add, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it's very, very important for Bradford too. It is important too to note that the space industry is a source of good jobs, and not just for people with PhDs in astrophysics either. At the Scottish Affairs Select Committee last year, the Scottish Affairs Select Committee heard that there were great opportunities for many different people in the space industry. This will provide jobs for school leavers, graduates, PhDs across the spectrum, and that is something brilliant about space.
Well, my honourable friend give way.
Delighted to.
Does my honourable friend recognise that the Ministry of Defence is a massive investor in the space sector, investing £6.5 billion over the last decade? And would he welcome that investment as we are strengthening European security?
I'm obliged to my honourable friend for his intervention, and that is a very, very, very important point. Every week, if you pick up the paper and look at the discussion about where we need to invest in defence, we must invest in space, and we must have our own capability here in the United Kingdom. That is absolutely critical. Over my lifetime, the domain of warfare sadly has expanded from ground and sea and air to space and also online, and it is absolutely critical that we invest in our capabilities here. This bill is important for that, and may I say, the investment by the Ministry of Defence and the UK government in this, which I believe has cross-party support, is something that is absolutely critical that we continue to pursue. And it creates economic opportunities for the United Kingdom too. The lesson of history, the lesson of technological development, is that investment in defence has significant civilian spin-outs. So this is something that is quite right and proper that we invest in. So in summary, we have a huge opportunity here, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is one that we must seize. Now, this bill has one sole objective: to help get investment into the space sector so that we do seize this opportunity. With that in mind, Madam Deputy Speaker, I now turn to provide more detail about the legal and commercial background to the proposed bill. I must admit, with my previous career as a lawyer, I find this bit the most interesting. However, I quite accept that for others, it may have a more treacle-esque quality to it. No. I beg forgiveness, but I am afraid I must proceed. As I have explained, the bill seeks to limit space operators' liability. I start by emphasising that there is a very, very strong safety regime in operation here. Spaceflight activities are very heavily regulated by an independent regulator, the Civil Aviation Authority, to ensure that they are safe. In order to carry out spaceflight activities, one must obtain an operator licence granted by that independent regulator, the Civil Aviation Authority. That regulator is independent of government. It has a clear legal duty to secure the health and safety of the public and the safety of their property. This trumps all the other CAA's duties. They must put safety first. There is a range of tests that apply to the grant of licences, and the applicant must be able to demonstrate that it has taken all reasonable steps to ensure that the risks to people and property are as low as possible and that the level of those risks are acceptable. More generally, there is a detailed and robust safety regime governing spaceflight activities operated by the CAA. So here we are concerned with small risks that are reduced to the minimum extent possible by a strong regulatory regime. The next point I make is under international space law. The UK government has a long-standing legal liability for damage caused by spaceflight operations. There is, despite this safety regime, a residual risk that things go wrong and that the government faces claims. The UK government can make claims against operators under Section 36 of the 2018 Act, and again this is quite proper. And under this regime, operators have to assume risk, and under this bill, although it limits liability, operators continue to bear risk. Of course, the government needs to ensure that operators can pay out on claims made against it, which is why the 2018 regime and the licences make provision for compulsory insurance to be put in place by the operators. And it's, of course, as is usual the case, that businesses insure against foreseeable risks. Under the regulatory regime, the risks must be properly assessed and appropriate levels of insurance put in place. And the policy for this is set out in a detailed guidance document published by the Department for Transport, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, as it was then, the UK Space Agency and the UK Civil Aviation Authority. I think everyone will be relieved to hear that I do not propose to give a detailed exposition of the regime or take you through the document, but the critical point is that there is a regime that requires appropriate levels of insurance to be put in place which protects the taxpayer and is supervised by a strong independent regulator. The risk for spaceflight operators is that claims from the government under Section 36 exceed the carefully assessed insurance put in place. And the current legislation does not require the Civil Aviation Authority and the government to cap operators' liability. The relevant section makes it entirely optional. Section 12(2) of the 2018 Act provides an operator licence may specify a limit on the amount of the licensee's liability under Section 36 in respect of the activities authorised by the licence. May here is a key word. My proposal, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that may is changed to must, and an any in Section 36 is changed to the as a consequence. So this bill simply swaps two words with two other words. The government, in fact, has a long-standing policy, as did the preceding government, that liability should be limited. However, the issue for investors is that this is not set out in statute. This means that a government in the future and regulators could change this policy with comparative ease, and that could damage existing investments and mean that investors could find that they have exposure to unlimited liabilities in the future. This is deterring and will continue to deter investment in the United Kingdom. And this issue is causing real concern to investors. This is a point that the space industry has made to the government. In 2020, a cross-departmental consultation took place on the insurance and liability regime under the 2018 Act. In summary, many respondents raised concerns with the lack of a legally firm guarantee within the policy to limit liability. And this caused concerns that operators would be exposed to unlimited liability in the future. The then government accepted the point, but explained that introducing a provision to require a cap on liability required primary legislation. And this, Madam Deputy Speaker, is what I am proposing today. The government also made clear that, meantime, all operator licences would include a limit of liability, and I agree with that decision. The issue was also discussed in the 2021 report prepared by the Task Force on Innovation, Growth and Regulatory Reform, which proposed the introduction of a mandatory cap on the liability of licence holders to encourage investment in the sector. And respondents to a UK Space Agency consultation in 2021-22 also reiterated calls to make the limit of liability in Section 12(2) of the 2018 Act mandatory. It is to be seen that this is a long-standing unresolved issue. The space industry and potential investors are right to be concerned about this. I am, as some honourable members know, a recovering lawyer, and in my past career I had to deal with complex liability issues. I'd like to reassure members none of these were of my own making. What I learned is that investors are happy to accept risk, but if you're investing millions and billions in a high-risk industry, you'll want to know that you're not exposed to unlimited losses beyond what you can reasonably insure. The investors are correct to state that a government policy such as this can be withdrawn from with much greater ease than a statute. Indeed, the plain fact in my experience is the scope for legal challenge when government policies are withdrawn can often be quite limited. Many investors simply will not invest in a situation like this. They want to know that risks are clearly and fairly allocated, manageable and covered by insurance. And they want to understand that the liability regime is legally solid. By contrast to a guidance document, a statute will provide much greater protection. Investors accept that it will not provide absolute protection, but a statutory protection will give much more comfort. And this is, Madam Deputy Speaker, a reasonable position for potential investors to adopt. And it is important to understand but investors have a choice of places in which to invest. Very many countries want this space investment. The United Kingdom has to be attractive to investors. These investments are long-term, and investors need to be sure that covered on a firm legislative basis. They do need some security. My understanding is that all other launching nations, that's nations with launch capability, limit liabilities or provide a state guarantee for the current type of activities that take place from their territory. We are at present at a disadvantage faced with this massive economic opportunity. There is a clear risk to the competitiveness of our space industry and growth as a result. The unlimited liability of the indemnity to government is damaging investor confidence and makes the United Kingdom a less attractive place from which to launch. This will undermine our ambition for growth in the sector and, may I say also, our ambitions to ensure that we can keep our country safe and grow our defence in this area too. This bill confronts the problem and makes the UK a much more attractive place to invest. To sum up, Madam Deputy Speaker, I suspect some people will be glad of a summing up after this dry topic. I'm happy to keep going longer if that is it. The space sector is central to almost everyone's lives. How could we check our emails in this chamber without the space sector? There is a very significant economic opportunity for the UK here. The space sector is critical for our defence. The United Kingdom has a very firm foundation for a thriving space industry, and we must build on it, including Scotland, South Wales, Cornwall, the southeast of England. Even there will be people in the Isle of Wight, I believe, who work in space.
Hear, hear. Starstruck.
There is a robust safety regime covering space, operated by an incredibly highly experienced independent regulator. Operators have to put in place compulsory insurance. There is a concern for investors that above that insurance they have unlimited exposure. This has been repeatedly explained to government. The investor's position is reasonable. The proposed change limits liability and makes the UK a more effective place to invest. This bill will help create economic growth and jobs and prosperity for decades to come, from Cornwall to Shetland. This bill is good news for the great city of Glasgow, the great city of Edinburgh, for great South Wales, and good news and growth for growth and job across the United Kingdom. I say it is time to resolve this issue. Jobs and investment depend on it, including, Madam Deputy Speaker, in Bradford, which is a real centre of excellence for this. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill changes two words, may to must, and any to the. I've always struggled with THs. It may be one of the smallest bills in recent memory. I have not done the research into the smallest bill in Parliament's history, but I guess we're looking for a one-word bill. But it has one big objective, to ensure further investment in the UK space industry. I could say that this is one small step for Parliament, but a big step for a space industry, if I was any good at puns and humours. But as I suspect some of the honourable members from Scotland here could tell you, I am no good at puns and I am humourless. Nevertheless, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this bill to the House. I'm obliged, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time. I call Martin Rhodes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, I wish to make a declaration of interest as a member of the all-party parliamentary group on space. It is perhaps fitting that a week after the planets aligned in the night sky for the first time in 360 years, that this House is considering legislation that can help the UK's thriving space industry. Almost one-fifth of all UK jobs in the space sector are based in Scotland. Scotland's space sector is leading in small satellite manufacturing. Glasgow builds more small satellites than any other place in Europe. Scotland is also the data-driven capital of Europe, hosting more than 170 data science companies. I'd therefore like to commend the efforts of my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow East, in his bill, which will help remove barriers to spaceflight activities for Scotland and the UK as a whole, growing the space launch sector. On the detail of this bill, it helps demonstrate how specific measures supported by the UK government in reserve matters can help developing industries in Scotland and the UK to grow and prosper. Just as engineers need certainty in their calculations for successful space launches, so do companies need certainty for them to be comfortable when investing into an industry. Therefore, in the case of this bill, providing an operating liability cap for spaceflight operators, this delivers that legal certainty for the space sector to know the upfront maximum amount they could be liable for. This, therefore, reduces uncertainty and makes it easier for them to secure insurance coverage. I am aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, that talk of insurance and liability is not as interesting as spaceflight itself. But nonetheless, these are important for the development of the sector. It signals that it is a growth sector that we are willing to support and be in dialogue with. This bill was informed by consultation on spaceflight liability, insurance and charging by the previous government. Now my honourable friend is ensuring this bill helps reduce the financial risk for these businesses and aligns the UK with international standards, thus making it a more attractive location for space companies to invest and operate in. Overall, what these points mean is more space flights out of Scotland and the rest of the UK, more innovation and more well-paid job creation. Supporting growth in the space sector will also see a network effect across my own city of Glasgow and further afield. My constituency of Glasgow North is home to the University of Glasgow, which houses the expertise, skills and talent that not only already benefit the sector, but also serve as a vital pipeline for its future growth. Additionally, Glasgow has long been a hub for small satellite design and manufacturing, with Scotland holding the title of the second largest producer of satellites after the United States of America. In the Glasgow North constituency, the West of Scotland Science Park and the Sky Park in Finnieston further strengthen this ecosystem, hosting manufacturers and research development sites that support everything from rocket launchers to small satellite spacecraft. These facilities play a crucial role in driving innovation and providing high-quality skilled jobs, reinforcing Glasgow's position at the forefront of the global space industry. Therefore, I urge colleagues to support this bill to help the space industry achieve the legal certainty around liabilities it needs to continue to thrive and source investment. With this growth, we can help deliver jobs and prosperity for Glasgow, Scotland and the rest of the UK. I congratulate my honourable friend for bringing this bill to the House and am pleased to support it.
I call Katrina Murray.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm proud to rise in support of my honourable friend from Glasgow East's bill on the space industry. My constituency of Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, like large parts of Scotland, has a burgeoning footprint in the aerospace industry. Not just the industry, but the supply chain, as my honourable friend from Edinburgh South West also points out. Kirkintilloch, Kilsyth, very much part of my area, and it's becoming one of our largest industrial sectors. Now, being honest, my interest in space, like many of my generation, is a combination of sci-fi and the launch of being made to sit and watch the launch of the space shuttle. So, as the opening statements of Star Trek told us, space, the final frontier, and to boldly go where no man has gone before. Given that what separates my honourable friend's constituency and mine is the M73 and is a major part of Scotland's motorway and logistics infrastructure, probably fair to say that that's not somewhere that people do boldly go on that journey every day. Although, having once spent the night on the motorway during a snowstorm, yeah, it does feel a bit like the final frontier at times. This motion in itself is exceptionally technical in its nature, and the need for it is immense. The Prime Minister rightly reminded us this week of the need for Europe to be united and to not rely on the United States when conflict comes to our continent. Whilst this is true in Ukraine, it's also immediately true in space. There may be competition within the sector in Europe. We've even heard about the competition within the sector in Scotland, but this is healthy. We also, however, we need to break up the dominance of the US private sector in this space. To develop the sector at warp speed is vital. Constituencies like mine are crying out for advanced engineering jobs, jobs which are highly skilled and naturally well paid. Our local economies benefit from people coming from all over the country, coming to work in those factories and those warehouse units. You visit those units, as I've had the privilege to do, and you meet the full range of people who work there. No longer is engineering the engineering I knew of my childhood. It's no longer pale, male and stale. The role of women in the industry is absolutely obvious. And that takes us right back again to the original series of Star Trek in the 70s, where the inspirational and transformative effect in Nichelle Nichols had as Lieutenant Uhura and cannot be overstated. The fact that she was hired by NASA to recruit women and people of colour for the Space Shuttle programme between 1977 and 2015 showed the impact that she had. Many astronauts have credited Nichols and Uhura as an inspiration for them to want to work there. Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman in space in '92, and a year later appeared on the decks of the USS Enterprise as part of Star Trek The Next Generation. Every single device that we love to watch on Star Trek is what we're using today. If we look at all of our iPads, they were there as the first handheld mobile devices. The personal access display screens that were there. Or the Star Trek world, Jean-Luc Picard, who had saying tea, Earl Grey, hot, to his replicator, which then appears from the ship's reserves. Haven't quite got to that level of sophistication yet, but the work that 3D printers are currently doing through computer-aided design and the effect that this has on the advanced engineering sector cannot be underestimated. Indeed, we're now seeing food products being printed too, so maybe in the not-too-distant Stuart, Patrick Stewart himself will be able to order up a tea Yorkshire hot version. We have not yet developed, the NASA have said, well, not yet developed, NASA have said that the warp drive is something that could be possible in the future. Investment in our sector makes it happen, or in the words again of Jean-Luc Picard, it makes it so.
I call Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to speak in this debate to support Honourable Friend the Member for Glasgow East with his mission to make positive change in this industry. Now, I profess to say that I have little particular knowledge about space, but the points that were so well made by himself and others about this slight change to the licensing for space flight, and that is the launch, flight and return of spacecraft, satellites that I can just about envisage, would encourage greater investment in businesses. And I think that growth element and that investment is so important for all of us and for our economy. And when we reflect on day-to-day life and how much is reliant on satellites, you know, we had a really important debate earlier about the use of smartphones, but hey, we all need them and they're reliant on satellites in space. And so I reflected on space flight and activities in outer space. And like some others in this chamber, you know, I remember, you know, Flash Gordon, Star Wars coming out, and it was so surreal and fantastical. And indeed, a long, long time ago, in a galaxy far away. Okay. I got it in Hansard. But that encouragement investment in space, I think, is really important. And I speak as a granddaughter of an eminent physicist. And again, that combination of science and the evolution in engineering, science, computing, all of this, which is so important for the future business in space. And while we talk about the investment in businesses, I wanted to really make my point about encouraging young people to search out a career in this new future industry around space, with careers in space science and technology being, something that others have both spoken about, particularly in Scotland. It's great to hear. And while my honourable friend represents Glasgow East, he is also originally from Bedfordshire, which is another reason why I wanted to speak in this debate, and gives me a brilliant opportunity to talk about the University of Bedfordshire, with the main campus being in my constituency of Luton South and South Bedfordshire, but I appreciate the other campus being in Bedford itself. And there are some brilliant opportunities to study, whether the courses there being in artificial intelligence and robotics, computer science, software engineering and applications, electronic engineering, mechanical engineering. All of these would lead to brilliant future careers in the space industry. So I highly encourage young people who are looking to forge a career, but equally career changers. I do wholeheartedly believe in lifelong learning, so maybe yet I could become someone involved in space. But yes, the space industry being that growth area for jobs across the UK is really important, and while there may not be, well, there are some in my constituency, I think it is fantastic that we are looking to grow our economy up and down the United Kingdom. And so I absolutely welcome this change that's being put forward, small though it may be, but a big impact. So I wanted to get on record my support for this and the importance it will be for people in my constituency who may want to seek out a future career in the space industry. Thank you.
I call Richard Quigley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I challenge anyone that's listened to my honourable friend from Glasgow East's speech not to think, what a time to be alive. we also have 3 castles, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the Isle of Wight, one of which imprisoned Charles I and also has a donkey that uses powers a wheel to draw water from its well. I have no idea what use that is to this debate, but I felt very much left out. I would like to thank my honourable friend for bringing forward this important bill, which not only reaffirms the UK's commitment to advancing space travel and exploration, but also ensures that this progress is built on a foundation of safety, accessibility and innovation. At a time when the global space sector is increasingly dominated by billionaire-led ventures, this bill sends a clear message. The UK remains dedicated to a space industry that is both pioneering and responsible, one that prioritises safety, fosters innovation and creates opportunity for all. I am proud to say that the Isle of Wight has a fantastic history in supporting and growing the UK space industry, because it gives colleagues a break from hearing me talk about ferries. Like in many other areas, we truly punch above our weight in this regard. In 1955, Saunders Roe, based in East Cowes, began developing the Black Knight research ballistic missile. Over the course of its programme, Black Knight achieved 22 successful launches without a single major failure, a remarkable feat that showcased British engineering excellence. This legacy highlights the Isle of Wight's pivotal role in the history of British space exploration and technological innovation, demonstrating its potential to contribute to the UK's modern space ambitions. However, we don't just want to be a part of space history, we want to be a part of space future. And one of the biggest barriers to growth in the UK space industry has been the issue of liability. At present, the government risks unlimited liability when launching satellites or conducting spaceflight operations. This uncertainty discourages investment, as insurers and financial backers are unwilling to support projects with unpredictable risks. The bill before us today is a simple but crucial fix. It will ensure that all spaceflight licences set a clear limit on operator liability, bring us in line with international standards. This change is particularly important for smaller, emerging space companies, many of which could see the Isle of Wight as a viable location for future space-related ventures. Indeed, I will.
Thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, and I'm really pleased to hear him mention small businesses. And does he agree with me that start-ups and scale-ups as small businesses are vital for our economies up and down the country?
Richard Quigley.
I thank my friend for the intervention. I do indeed agree with her that small businesses are going to be the way forward in terms of space technology, so I thank her very much. So the Isle of Wight was a viable location for future space-related ventures, whether in satellite manufacturing, research or launch support services.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Indeed, I will. I'm quite
I thank him for giving way. He mentioned satellites. Does he recognise the massive benefits that satellites give to the UK, everything from contactless transactions to supporting our defence and national security?
I thank my honourable friend for the intervention, and I do indeed appreciate that. Although, bear in mind the last bill we were all debating, I'm not sure how much we can say the benefits of satellites have brought. But yes, indeed, I do. We on the Isle of Wight already have the infrastructure to build upon with our skilled workforce, proximity to the South Coast's aerospace sector and strategic location for maritime and airspace testing. We are well placed to benefit from a fairer, clearer regulatory framework by passing this bill. We are not only strengthening the UK's position in the global space industry, but also opening new opportunities for regions like the Isle of Wight. Let us ensure that our island and the UK as a whole remains at the forefront of space innovation. I urge colleagues to support the change of 2 words, which this bill highlights, and not only our commitment to the growth agenda, but this country's commitment to the future.
I call Alex Ballinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to begin by extending my congratulations to the member for Glasgow East for calling this really important debate. Might be the most consequential 2 words that are ever changed in Parliament. So I'm very pleased to support it. Today marks the commencement of British Science Week, a celebration of science, technology, engineering and mathematics. The year's theme, Change and Adapt, is particularly fitting. It feels almost as if the stars have aligned, that we're therefore debating the space industry today, an industry built on technology, engineering and mathematics. This bill also perfectly aligns with the theme of British Science Week, as it seeks to implement small yet significant changes to adapt the space industry in the UK to make it fit for the future. As many other members have explained, the space sector is an incredibly valuable industry for the UK's economy, and one that we should all take pride in. The UK has long been committed to boosting commercial industry, with over 1,500 space companies on our shores. The UK leads in start-up and scale-up investment, second globally only to the United States. This is a huge achievement and a real opportunity that we must continue to nurture. A consultation undertaken by the previous government showed that operators holding unlimited liabilities often viewed this as a barrier to conducting spaceflight activities from the UK. The same consultation confirmed that other launching nations limit liabilities or provide a state guarantee for spaceflight activities conducted from their territory. This reality doesn't give investors a firm footing when looking towards the UK as a place to invest. Therefore, if we are truly serious about fostering growth across the length and breadth of our country, then the space sector plays an incredibly important role. This bill ensures that companies and investors are confident about the UK as a space in which to invest. Now people in Halesowen may question what this means for them, as we don't have the largest space industry in our small part of the West Midlands, but we all benefit from the services born from the space sector. Satellite technology, as I mentioned just now, made possible by the space industry, enables us to buy our morning coffees with contactless payment. Satellites assist with navigation, and importantly, many satellites support our defence and national security, keeping us all safe. The Ministry of Defence has been a major player in this field for some time, investing £6.5 billion over the last decade, including £5 billion for satellite communications through Skynet and £1.5 billion through the Defence Space Portfolio. The Defence Space Strategy sets out our focus on intelligence, surveillance and satellite communications. I know colleagues across the Chamber will welcome this approach, as does industry and allies alike. And the additional £1.5 billion of investment through Defence Space Portfolio brings significant investment to space and research and development and the job skills and expertise that go with it. Through that investment, we are not only ensuring that we meet the threats of the future, but are helping to build capability, expertise skills and jobs that will serve defence and the wider civil space programme. Any efforts to expand on this are therefore wholly welcomed. But investment in space is much more than this. I know for many of the members currently sat on these benches, particularly those of us with a keen interest in Star Trek, the prospect of sending rockets into the sky is an exciting one. At its core, investment in the space industry is about so much more. It is about unlocking the economy and allowing for significant economic growth.
Well, my honourable friend, Way.
I'm happy.
James Nash.
I thank him for giving way. He talked there about Health Owen potentially not benefiting hugely from the space industry, but this government is developing our industrial strategy right now. Does he agree with me that space should be right at the heart of that because of the potential that it could bring for places like Hells Owen and similar towns and cities across the country?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and I really welcome the UK's industrial strategy, particularly the defence industrial strategy. Now, there are many businesses in Hells Owen constituency, like Summers Forge, who really work in the defence sector in the UK. Primarily the Navy is our sort of engineering expertise, being a heavy industrial part of the country. But there are opportunities as well for lots of businesses across the country to get involved in the space sector, and this small change, I think, will unlock a lot of investment that could be used in many different places. There are other reasons to support the sector. If our goal is to eliminate the obstacles that hinder new businesses from establishing themselves in the UK, these two small words help make that change. And by doing so, we aim to create an environment where companies are encouraged to set up operations here rather than relocating to other countries. We must focus on retaining these jobs and ensuring that the employment opportunities of the future are available right here in the UK. Additionally, fostering a thriving business ecosystem will not only boost our economy, but also drive innovation and technological advancements. By supporting this sector, we can create a sustainable and prosperous future for our nation, attracting global talent and investment across science, technology, research and development, as well as contributing to this government's core mission of growth. Once again, I want to congratulate the member for this bill. It is a significant step towards ensuring the UK remains at the forefront of the space industry, driving economic growth and innovation for years to come. It is a clear signal to the world that the UK is open for business, ready to lead in the space industry, and dedicated to creating a thriving environment for growth and development. By supporting this bill, we are not only investing in the space industry, but also in the future of our country, ensuring that we remain competitive on the global stage and continue to attract the best and brightest minds to our shores.
James Nash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is an honour to rise today to speak on the Space Industry Indemnities Bill, and with it to champion the vital opportunities that the space sector provides, not just across the United Kingdom and especially to members from Scotland, but to the whole of our country and my area in particular, which is Nottinghamshire and my constituency of Rushcliffe. I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow East, for bringing this forwards, and commend him for talking for 30 minutes, having changed 2 words in the legislation. I'd like to begin by echoing the sentiments of my colleagues about the transformative potential of our country's space industry. The industry is already worth £17.5 billion to our economy, employing 50,000 people across the nation. It is quite literally a sector with no limits, and this bill represents a crucial step in ensuring that the UK remains a global leader in space exploration, satellite technology and aerospace innovation. I've already mentioned the UK's modern industrial strategy, which this government is developing, and I genuinely hope that space sits at the heart of it. In Rushcliffe and across Nottinghamshire, we are witnessing the profound impact of this growing sector, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm immensely proud to highlight some of the exciting developments that are taking place in our region. Just a short journey from my constituency is the Sherwood Observatory in Sutton in Ashfield, which is currently undergoing a £6.8 million transformation. Soon it will open a state-of-the-art planetarium and science discovery centre, providing an unparalleled gateway to the stars for local students and visitors alike. What makes this project particularly remarkable is its innovative use of a Victorian water reservoir, blending historical preservation with cutting-edge science education. Funded by the National Lottery, the Towns Funds and private donations, this planetarium will inspire countless young minds, encouraging the next generation of scientists, engineers and, hopefully, some astronauts. Madam Deputy Speaker, the planetarium is set to generate a host of economic opportunities for Nottinghamshire. It will attract visitors from across the UK, bolstering local tourism and supporting businesses in the area. And, of course, it underscores a commitment to making science accessible to all, regardless of background or geography. Closer to Rushcliffe, my own constituency, we have the University of Nottingham's Institute for Aerospace Technology, which is a shining example of our region's commitment to excellence in research and innovation. The IAT is at the forefront of aerospace and space research, working with leading global companies to develop technologies that will define the future of space exploration. I am also proud to note that the university ranks among the top institutions in the UK for aeronautical and aerospace engineering, securing 7th place in the 2025 UK Complete University Guide. This ranking is a testament to the exceptional work being done to prepare students for careers in the aerospace sector and to develop groundbreaking technologies that will propel our nation to new heights, both figuratively and literally. Madam Deputy Speaker, Nottinghamshire's space sector is not just about innovation, it's also about inclusion and opportunity. This industry offers young people in our region the chance to pursue exciting, well-paid careers without needing to leave their communities. As we saw in the 19... I will give way.
The space sector offers opportunities to all of our constituents across the country through the defence industrial strategies, opportunity to recognise the creation of STEM and support STEM-based activities, particularly in space. Would the Right Honourable Member agree with me that my industrial strategy submission, which highlights this, would be a worthy read for all members today?
Well, thank you for his intervention. I obviously haven't read his submission, but if he would like to send that to me, I would very much welcome reading it. The supply chain of the space sector is vast and diverse, as he has just alluded to, with almost 2,900 suppliers nationwide, half of which are SMEs. By supporting this bill and ensuring that the space industry can flourish in the UK, we are supporting businesses in Nottinghamshire and beyond. Businesses that employ local people, that contribute to the local economy and strengthen our communities. By the virtue of even discussing the space industry here today, we are sending a clear message that the UK is a competitive and supportive environment for space businesses. This is not just about fostering innovation, it's about ensuring jobs today, investment today, and ensuring that expertise remains here in the UK, benefiting constituencies like mine. Madam Deputy Speaker, Nottinghamshire is proudly playing its part. From the Sherwood Observatory's planetarium to the University of Nottingham's aerospace research, our region is a shining example of the transformative power of the space sector. This bill is an essential piece of legislation as it addresses the current requirement for unlimited liability in cases of damages involving UK-owned satellites, which has inadvertently driven operators away from the UK to other countries with more favourable terms. By supporting the industry today, we are not just enabling launches into orbit, we are launching a brighter future for young people, for our economy and for the UK as a whole. Collectively as a House, I hope we will seize this opportunity to lead the world in space innovation while ensuring that the benefits of this industry are felt in every corner of the country.
I call Shadow Minister Jerome Mayhew.
What fun we have, Madam Deputy Speaker. Here we are, we could have proper jobs, but instead we're talking about space industries and debating the importance of it in this chamber today. And I also recognise the ambition of the last government when deciding which department should monitor space industries. You might have thought it would have been the Science, Innovation and Technology department, but no, we thought it should be transport. So I'm delighted to stand in front of you today, Madam Deputy Speaker, to support this hidden jewel in our high-value industry. In the latest data that I could find, 2023, the industry has revenues in the United Kingdom of £18.9 billion. It's supported by about 1,800 businesses, the vast majority of those being SMEs, right across the country in all of our constituencies, developing the small satellites, which are the particular expertise of Glasgow. And I think it's perhaps the first time that I've had a Glasgow mafia of MPs in the chamber, all underselling their own constituency or their own city, because whilst they said that Glasgow is produces more satellites than any other city in Europe, I believe the Department of Transport has said in the previous debate in February 2024 that it is the largest manufacturer of satellites in the world outside of California. There are 52,000 FTE employed directly in the sector, and if you add in a supply chain of about 130,000 people across the country, you can see, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this is a very significant sector already, and it's growing. It's growing in terms of employment at 6.7% per year, and it's growing in terms of investment. Again, for 2023, the last year for which figures were available, there was investment of £8.85 billion into the space industry in the UK. And there is huge opportunity for more growth. The applications for small satellites are going through the roof on their way to orbit. And the geography of the UK is almost uniquely suitable for low Earth orbit satellites. Because whereas the large satellites, which we used to send up into space, need to be sent up near the equator, for low Earth orbits, the closer you are to the North Pole makes it more suitable. And the other thing we have, of course, is that we have lots of sea around us in case it all goes wrong. Additionally, the increasing geopolitical uncertainty of the world makes it more important than ever that we develop our domestic capabilities in this area. And it's for these reasons, all of these reasons, that the last Conservative government backed commercial spaceflight from the UK and created the founding instrument for the industry, which was the Space Industry Act of 2018. It created the legal framework for commercial spaceflight, and it followed up in 2021 with the creation of a space flight regulator, the Civil Aviation Authority, taking advantage, I'm proud to say, of the genuine Brexit benefits of being able to create this regulatory environment far faster and in a more comprehensive fashion than our EU friends over the water have been able to do. And this gives us a genuine commercial opportunity for rapid growth, which we've already seen in the numbers that I've mentioned already, but further rapid growth. But the 2018 Act, whilst good, was not perfect. And as we have seen from yesterday's news in Florida, when you do occasionally have what's described as a rapid unscheduled disassembly, what goes up can come down. And when it does so, it can cause loss and damage. Now, UN space treaties, Madam Deputy Speaker, make nation states responsible for the loss and damage caused by space activity from their nationals or launch from their territorial areas. And it's for this reason that Section 36(3)A of the 2018 Act passed financial responsibility away from the state and onto the operator, requiring that the person carrying out spaceflight activities must indemnify His Majesty's government for loss subject to any limit set out in Section 12(2). And 12(2) gives power to the regulator, the Civil Aviation Authority, to set an upper limit to that indemnity. Now, the rationale for a limit on indemnity is quite clear, because without it, it would be impossible for insurers to assess the quantum of risk associated with an unforeseen event. And if you can't assess the quantum, then the risk in actuarial terms can no longer be insurable. And yet we have already, through legislation, imposed a legal duty on any space operator to have sufficient insurance, which begs the question, what insurance is sufficient? And it's this issue here which has been identified and is the genesis of the two-word bill that we have before us today. So the problem is the wording, is the cap on indemnity is not mandatory, but it allows for a cap. And big investors, before taking an investment decision of many hundreds of millions of pounds potentially, need reassurance beyond a governmental policy statement that will give them the confidence to commit large sums for investment. And this bill fixes the problem. The change to Section 12 turns the power to cap indemnity to a requirement to do so. The last government supported a private member's bill from the Honourable Member for Woking, Jonathan Lord, in suspiciously similar drafting terms. And that second reading was held on the 23rd of February of last year. And to my great disappointment, it was lost in the election wash-up in the approach to July of last year. So this side of the House, His Majesty's loyal opposition, wholeheartedly welcome the reintroduction of the bill today. It's given us an opportunity, if nothing else, to rehash some of the rather painful space puns. Hansard is still reeling, Madam Deputy Speaker, from last time, but it has identified, if honourable members have read Hansard from February of last year, there is a noticeable difference in the kind of space puns used. For Labour, I'm sorry to say it's Trekkies, Flash Gordon, Star Wars. Conservatives, the Clangers and the Soup Dragon. Much more patriotic. But there were other contributions. There were other contributions which were worthy of mention from today's debate. So I've already given reference to the over-representation from Glasgow, about half of the debate. But there were some very serious points made, highlighting the Honourable Member for Glasgow East, the first space lawyer in Parliament that I can think of, the geopolitical risks, the need for satellite launch capability in the United Kingdom. The Honourable Member for Glasgow North noting that about 20% of all space jobs are in Scotland. And the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch highlighting very properly the increased role for women in the sector and the potential to break down some stereotypical barriers, for which I commend her. Moving south of the border, the Honourable Member for Luton South and South Bedfordshire had unfortunate references to both Flash Gordon and Star Wars, but she did make a very serious point about the opportunities for young people in her constituency and beyond. And moving further south still, the Honourable Member for the Isle of Wight West, beyond commenting on what a time it is to be alive, for which I agree with him, he may have noted that the Honourable Member for Glasgow East's previous career was chargeable by the hour, and that may give some explanation to the position in which we found ourselves in. So all these recognise the importance, all these contributions, Madam Deputy Speaker, recognise the huge importance that space already plays in our economy and the incredible opportunity that the sector has to drive growth for all of us. So this bill does give the Minister, the Member for Wakefield and Rothwell, the opportunity to confirm that His Majesty's Government, despite the change in party, remains fully supportive of space industries, and that he remains wholly behind the Government's target that the UK will be the leading provider of commercial small satellite launches in Europe by 2030. So I congratulate the Honourable Member for Glasgow East for securing this debate and proposing this legislation. 2 pesky words, in fact just 6 letters if you add them up. 6 years in the making. It does beg the question about the speed in which our legislative processes are able to operate. But after the first bill's own unscheduled rapid disassembly in the general election, I do hope that this bill has a smooth lift-off and takes its place in the firmament of British legislation.
I call Minister Simon Lightwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I first of all thank the honourable friend, the member for Glasgow East, for bringing this short but crucial bill before the House. I also commend my honourable friend for delivering such a brilliant and informative speech, and I commend him for managing to cling on for as long as he did in his very comprehensive speech. Some would call him the Rocket Man of Parliament. And thank all the other members who have spoken in today's debate. And speaking of stars, may I also wish the member for Beckingham and Penge a very happy birthday for yesterday. I hope that he had a stellar time. I'm pleased to confirm that this has the full support of the government. Before I begin, let me outline some general observations about the UK and spaceflight. The UK's approach to launch positions in the UK as a leading international partner in the space sector and ensuring Europe's independent access to space. The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology has responsibility for coordinating civil space policy, working closely with the departments across government to ensure space services can support their needs, and that space science and research can act as an enabler across the economy while building strong links with the wider science ecosystem. To achieve our ambition, government has invested over £57 million through the Launch UK programme to grow new UK markets for small satellite launch and suborbital spaceflight. And in terms of regulatory reform, the UK has one of the most advanced and trusted modern space regulatory frameworks in the world. On the 8th of October, DCIT, the Secretary of State for DCIT, announced a new Regulatory Innovation Office, the RIO, to reduce the burden of red tape and speed up access to new technologies that improve our daily lives. The RIO has made space as one of its top priorities, and we look forward to working with them on our wider regulatory reforms to enable innovation. This government is implementing a series of space regulatory reforms stemming from the recommendations published in May 2024 in the Space Regulatory Review. The government has worked with the sector to determine a prioritised approach to the reforms to maximise growth and innovation potential for the sector. One recommendation involves the implementation of a regulatory sandbox to stress test the regulatory framework for enabling rendezvous proximity operations. The sandbox commenced in October 2024, with Stage 1 due to complete in March 2025, providing vital recommendations to enable growth of these novel missions and strengthen the UK's capabilities. We're also exploring financial tools, incentives and market access schemes that promote sustainable activities and encourage self-investment, inward investment and support a level playing field for the UK companies. Alongside the regulatory reform package, work is underway on developing a range of new innovative regulatory measures to support growth of the UK sector, new mission types and incentivise the uptake of space sustainability measures. As my honourable friend said, the bill will amend two sections of the Space Industry Act of 2018 to provide legal certainty that all spaceflight operator licences must include a limit on the amount of the operator's liability to the government under Section 36 of the 2018 Act. This short but crucial bill will go far away to encourage much-needed investment into the sector. Before I outline why the government are fully supportive of this bill and boldly going where no man has gone before, I will briefly outline some of the UK's achievements in spaceflight. On the 9th of January, the UK made history by conducting the first ever orbital launch attempt from UK soil through Virgin Orbit at Spaceport Cornwall, demonstrating the UK's growing launch capability and position as a leading spacefaring nation. In December 2023, Saxonwood Spaceport on the Shetland Islands became the UK's first vertical launch site to receive a spaceport licence. In January 2025, Rocket Factory Osborg became the UK's first licensed vertical launch operator. The UK's approach to launch positions the UK as a leading international partner in the space sector. As my honourable friend will be aware, Scotland makes a vital contribution to the wider UK space ecosystem. Scotland's space sector is home to advanced satellite manufacturing capabilities and has a fast-growing satellite launch market. In fact, Glasgow builds more small satellites than anywhere else outside of California. And the UK is now the second most attractive destination for commercial space investment after the United States. This government has made it clear that unlocking growth is vital to rebuilding the UK and supporting high-tech jobs, which unlocks investment and improves living standards across the country. We are capitalising on the UK's excellence in science and innovation to ensure our world-class research translates to commercial success, rebalancing the system and setting up the financial services sector to innovate, grow and seize the opportunities for investment in business, infrastructure and clean energy across Britain. The space sector is hugely valuable to the UK's economy. It's worth over £18.9 billion and directly employs more than 52,000 people. It supports over 126,000 jobs across the supply chain. At least 346 billion of the UK GDP is supported by satellite services such as navigation, meteorology, communications and Earth observation. It is now possible to launch satellites from UK spaceports rather than relying solely on overseas spaceports to launch UK-built satellites into orbit. As I previously mentioned, in January 23, Virgin Orbit conducted a historic first launch from the UK spaceport Cornwall. In December 23, Saxavord Spaceport in the Shetland Islands became the first licensed vertical launch spaceport. This year, we hope to witness the UK's first vertical launch by German company Rocket Factory Osborg, with more to follow. Growing our launch capability is already creating high-skilled jobs and opportunities in communities right across the UK, as well as catalysing investment across the supply chain. The government is investing in new launch companies such as Orbex, who have built factories in Scotland, creating hundreds of new jobs, ready to take advantage of the new opportunities that the government have created. Saxavord Spaceport anticipate that by 2025, the spaceport site could support a total of 650 jobs in Scotland, including 140 locally and 210 across the wider Shetland region. Other launch operators, such as Skyrora, a UK company based in Glasgow, is also thriving and have also indicated that it will conduct its first suborbital launch from the UK in the near future. The UK space industry already supports an industrial base of over 1,500 space companies. It provides high-skill, high-quality jobs across the UK, with over 77% of employees holding at least a primary degree. Building on the success of the UK's space sector, the government will continue to support business through a stable policy environment, strengthening our economic institutions and giving investors the certainty that they need to fuel growth. The government recognises the important contribution in the space sector that it has on ordinary people's lives. Growth is the #1 mission of this government, and this bill has the potential to drive growth within the sector by encouraging further investment. It is important that the UK builds on the current successes of an already thriving and dynamic space sector. This government is delivering our plan for change, with investment and reform to deliver growth. We will ensure, through the measures this government is taking to deliver growth, that the UK becomes a leading provider of commercial small satellite launches in Europe by 2030. To achieve our ambition, government continues to support spaceports and launch operators to grow new UK markets for small satellite launch and suborbital spaceflight. The government is committed to making improvements to both the Space Industry Act of 2018 and the Space Industry Regulations to ensure our legal framework and regulations remain effective and internationally competitive. The UK is one of the most advanced and trusted modern space regulatory frameworks in the world. Let's explore for a moment what liabilities are covered by the Space Industry Act. There are two types of liability covered. Section 34 places a strict liability for injury or damage caused to persons or property on land or water in the UK or in the territorial sea to the UK, or an aircraft in flight over such land, water or sea, such as persons, property on such aircraft, by a craft or space object being used by an operator carrying on spaceflight activities in the UK. The uninvolved general public suffering injury or damage can bring a claim against the operator without having to prove fault. Section 36 places a liability on the operator carrying on the spaceflight activities to indemnify the UK government or person or body listed in Section 36(2) for any claims brought against them for loss or damage caused by those activities. Therefore, UK nationals have the same easy recourse to compensation and protections as foreign nationals have under the UN Liability Convention. The Government, of course, recognises that the question of liability and insurance is of utmost concern to the space sector. In responses to a consultation on the draft then space industry regulations in 2020, and a call for evidence to inform orbital liability and insurance policy in October 2021, industry made clear that holding unlimited liabilities will have an adverse effect on the UK spaceflight industry. Industry have advised that it is impossible to obtain insurance for an unlimited amount, and therefore impossible to obtain insurance that will provide full coverage of an operator's liability to indemnify government and their liability to uninvolved third parties. Furthermore, potential liabilities for spaceflight are not easily quantifiable. So, if government did not limit a spaceflight operator's liability, spaceflight companies and investors would instead look to more favourable regulatory regimes in other countries where governments share the risks involved by limiting an operator's liability or by offering state guarantees, such as in the United States or in France. As my honourable friend has explained, there are powers in the Space Industry Act to limit a spaceflight operator's liability when carrying out spaceflight activities from the UK. The 2018 Act enables commercial spaceflight activities, which include launching a spacecraft and operating a satellite in orbit, for example, or other activities such as the operation of a spacecraft and management of a range to be carried out under licence in the United Kingdom. The 2018 Act sets out the broad licensing and regulatory framework for carrying out such activities and is underpinned with more detailed provisions in the Space Industry Regulations of 2021. The 2018 Act currently provides powers for the regulator to specify a limit on the amount of the operator's liability in their licence, but the Act does not make it mandatory. Currently, under Section 12(2) of that Act, provides an operator licence may specify a limit on the amount of a licensee's liability to indemnify under Section 36. Current government policy is that the regulator should use these powers to specify a limit on operator liability in the licence, so that no operator will face unlimited liability. The government fully supports this bill and it's going forward. It's consistent with a policy that all space flight licences should have a limit on liability. It will not, therefore, impose any additional liability or risk on the UK taxpayers compared to current policy. The government also recognises the value that industry places on having legislative certainty on this matter. The space sector continually expresses its concerns about the use of the word may in Section 12(2) of the Space Industry Act. I'm therefore grateful to my honourable friend for this bill, which by amending 12(2) of the Space Industry Act will meet a key request from the sector. In closing, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a Wakefield and Rothwell MP, let me pay tribute to a proud Yorkshireman and the intercosmic former captain of the USS Enterprise, Patrick Stewart, with Star Trek The Next Generation, of course, being by far the best iteration of the Star Trek franchise. I'll leave you with this. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the UK government. Our continuing missions to kick-start economic growth and make Britain a clean energy superpower, to seek out breaking down barriers to opportunity and take back our streets, and to boldly build an NHS fit for the future. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, make it so.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Military Action Bill, second reading.
Order. The member in charge has given instruction earlier today that he wishes to defer his bill to Friday, the 4th of July, and will not move second reading on his bill today. We will therefore move on to the next bill set down for today.